Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first episode one of Living Authentically, Becoming Your True Self. I'm really, really excited about this first episode. And in this podcast, we're going to explore what it really means to live, speak, and lead from a place of truth and kindness. I'm your host, Sue Whitaker, and I want to talk a little bit about myself as well as why I'm doing this podcast and what you're going to find in the episodes ahead. So, I'm a life transitions and identity coach, which means that I guide individuals through significant life changes such as divorce, grief, stress, anxiety, physical challenges, hormonal challenges, you name it, anything that is a significant life change. I like to help people to rediscover their true selves and embrace new beginnings and new chapters with confidence and clarity. I've actually been in corporate HR for over 20 years, specializing in learning and development, training, coaching, mentoring, and I'm a mental health first aider. I actually set up my business, Black Star HR, on the 10th of January this year, 2025. And since then, I have been helping clients to understand more about themselves, the life that they're leading, and how they can live authentically. That's really the purpose and aim of this podcast, is to help people to understand what makes up the different parts of their identity, and also how do they actually live day to day in a more authentic fashion that's right and true for them. So in today's episode, I actually want to talk to you about self-discovery and self-identity. Basically, from my side, this is the two key areas in which you can use them to work together and basically make sure that it doesn't matter which one comes first. And I'll talk about that a little bit in a minute, but it doesn't matter which one we identify with first or how we use these tools, but it's more about what the outcome is, what they're telling you. So I want to share some personal experiences and insights from myself, and I'm happy really to just dive straight in. First of all, if anybody knows me well, they'll know that I love metaphors, as I believe they give you and your mind's eye something to focus on whilst actually explaining things. So let's have a look at the two phrases I mentioned. Let's look at self-discovery to begin with. Self-discovery is the road, if you will. It represents an ongoing journey and processes of learning about yourself. Self-identity is the car, symbolizing the person traveling down that road, continuously being shaped and defined by the experiences encountered along the way. So if you wanted to actually draw it out, you could easily say that self-discovery is the life that you're going to lead, whereas self-identity is you yourself going down through that life and all the bends and twists that actually take place in it. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the two differences and what they actually mean to me and how I actually talk to clients when they're talking about starting this for the first time. Now, what I will say is that you don't have to have all of this figured out. It doesn't matter whether you've been looking at your own self-improvement or self-development for some years, whether you've actually been doing it and you've taken a break and you want to revisit it, or you're just actually at the very, very start, and this is the first podcast that you've actually spoken or heard somebody talk about it. If this is the first podcast you've looked at, I am really, really grateful that you started with me. But as I always say to everybody who I talk to, feel free to go out there and talk and look and explore and research everybody else, because we all have slightly different ways of how we actually process these sorts of things. So going back to the main content. So self-discovery, we talked about it being a road. So the process itself is actually a continual process of exploring your thoughts, your feelings, your values, and the experiences to understand who you truly are. One of the really key areas of this could be literally finding out what your preferences are. So do you like that food? Do you not like that food? from a young age, we already start to have a really clear idea of what we like and what we don't like. It's quite simplified when I put it like that. But as you grow older, the principle is very much still the same. If you automatically think badly of something because of a phrase or because of a color or because of a picture, that is something that is unique to you. What you might actually see in a particular image or a color, other people will see differently. And that's absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But sometimes just having the foresight, or actually even just the self awareness to acknowledge that, is a really good part of the self discovery journey already. Values and feelings are often things that can come across quite complicated. So when we're talking about values and beliefs, and I will actually talk about those in a particular podcast dedicated to them because I'm quite passionate about it. But when you look at those values and beliefs, you often work out that sometimes you weren't necessarily born with those particular values or beliefs. Certain things in your life, the process, the journey, the path that you went on of self-discovery can basically have a big impact on shaping your values and beliefs. And again, a lot of the podcast that I want to do in this series is going to be around exploring those different areas. So another aspect of it is actually of self-discovery is the journey itself. It involves a conscious effort to examine your life, try new things, and reflect on your passions, your needs, and your desires. Now, we could argue that the road you're going to be traveling down, you're going to travel down whether you want to or not, particularly if we're actually saying that it is akin to your life. You're going to end up getting older. You're going to end up trying different things. And you're going to end up actually in different chapters and places that you didn't even think you would be. But the main thing about this is the conscious effort. It's the fact that you actually want to examine your life, or the fact that you want to examine what you haven't done in your life. Do you want to try new things? Are you scared of trying new things? Why are you scared? And reflect on what you want and what you need, and also what you're passionate about. So for me, this is a really big key one. I actually spent quite a lot of my life growing up thinking that I knew who I was, where I was, and what my purpose was. I always actually talk about one thing I'm particularly proud of, which actually happened in my 40s. So I call it my midlife crisis. I talk about the fact that I got closer to horses, which are probably one of my favorite animals in this world. When I was younger, I always used to love having model horses, toy horses. And what I would do is I would quite often throw the doll that came with it over my shoulder and just wanted to play with the horse itself. As I grew older, I actually wanted to ride donkeys on the beach in Blackpool, which for people in the UK is a common spot. I came from a working class family, which means that owning horses weren't actually really an option. And even paying for riding lessons was actually not really an option either. But I grew up in the West Midlands, and in that area, there were coal mines, and a lot of them around there were actually akin to using horses for pulling, for labour. So there was always this element of horses were nearby because I used to see horseshoes being hung on walls and also people telling stories and sharing their own experiences of how they used their horses. Obviously, as I grew older, I started to actually sponsor horse sanctuaries and also being interested in how to care for horses. But my career and the need for actual work and finances meant that I never really got much further than just having it as a mild interest. In my 40s, I decided that enough was enough, and that rather than just trying to see horses at any given moment I could when I traveled, what I wanted to do was actually own a horse. So when I was 40 years old, I owned my first horse. She was a rescue, of course, and she was somebody that was actually living quite an old age. But she taught me so much about myself and about actually how to look after horses. She was well trained, and we actually spent a good 2.5 years of giving her the best retirement life that she'd had, given that she'd worked very hard. And when she passed away, obviously, whilst I did mourn her passing, it meant that she was able to set me up for horse ownership for life. Cue a few years later, and now today I own my own 2 horses. The reason why I own 2? Well, that's a complicated story and probably one for another time. But what I will say is that my 2 horses are something that I've desired since I was really young. And the fact that I can fulfill that dream and fulfill my passion before it was over the hill or I was in retirement has actually been really quite a good eye opener for me. Horses are not cheap, and they're also not easy to look after. There's quite a lot of physical as well as emotional needs that you have to cater for, but I love them dearly. And what's greater still is that my husband actually really likes them as well. I was actually always hoping that what I would do is I would not only own a horse, but I would actually ride a horse. And I'm also privileged to be able to do that. And equally, my husband also rides as well, even though he probably never had that desire at the beginning until he met me. So one of the passions that I've had all through my life that I've really embraced in the last few years is my passions for animals. So I love rescue. I love helping with rescue. And I love helping people who are involved in rescue, which is probably one of the reasons why in my business, I would be really, really privileged to actually coach people from the rescue world. So going back to the whole self-discovery piece, there is actually another element, and that's actually the path itself. The journey that you actually take can be guided by various tools. So you can look at the tools as, I guess, kind of paving stones or maybe road markings of where to guide you and maybe guide you away from some of the more difficult or challenging areas of the road. What do I mean by the tools? Well, I mean things like journaling, travel, specific digital apps, meditation, things that will lead to new insights about your inner self. There's actually a whole load of them that I can actually provide, but these are just to name a few. Basically, it doesn't really matter what the tool is. It's actually how you use it. So as long as you're getting some insight about your inner self, no tool is actually wrong and can still be used again and again. So let's talk a little bit now about the car, self-identity. Self-identity in itself can actually be quite a difficult thing to characterize. But again, there are a few key areas that would actually identify, excuse the pun, or help you to come to terms with what it is and the work you're trying to do. Firstly, it's the traveling aspect. Your identity is who you are at any given moment. It is shaped by the insights and experiences you gain through self-discovery. So again, when you start on the journey, you don't necessarily have a huge number of experiences. Whereas if you're going through the journey or you're in the middle of your journey, can already look back on what you've already come through. This is one of the reasons why on this podcast, I'm going to be talking about some of the insights and some of the areas that will actually have an impact on your self-identity. One of the other aspects is the vehicle of experience. So I always akin this to the actual car that you're driving. So yes, I've just said that you are the car, and it could be that you're looking at the exterior. So your car is the vehicle you use to navigate the road of self-discovery. It is the entity that experiences the journey and is subsequently shaped by it. So I guess you could say that it's a little bit about what you are as a person and your body. Maybe you've decided to change your hair in a particular style, or you choose to wear particular clothes, mostly because of the experiences that life has given you. One really good example of this for me was when I was actually younger, I liked wearing trousers and dark colours. Wearing dresses wasn't really a thing. Even when I actually wore dresses as part of my working life, I wasn't really solidly comfortable with them. I always actually like to go for comfort. over necessarily appearance. There's several reasons for that, really. Some of it is due to the fact that I've had chronic conditions in the past. Although I say in the past, I still have them now. And as I talk to a lot of people, I say, as I've grown older, I actually get more chronic conditions, almost like I'm collecting some really bad Pokemon series. But one of the things that I really take away from this is that the vehicle of experience is the fact that you're learning things and that you're actually continuing to learn things through your experiences. So again, you may well actually have a particular bag because it helps your back. And the experience is because when you've used other bags, it's hurt your back, those sorts of things. The other aspect of it is the actual end result for self-identity. And this is the destination of the journey. It doesn't mean it's a fixed identity, but rather an evolving sense of self that becomes clearer as you travel the road. Now, obviously, I've said end result, and that might feel like a final thing. But again, when you're actually looking at who you are and what things make you up as a person, you can be hit by various different aspects that force you to actually look at your identity through life itself. So again, one of the things that I'll share with you a little bit about is my spiritual identity. When I was younger, my parents grew up and they were inherently Christian. But when I was actually starting to grow up, I was quite challenging and questioning to those particular practices and beliefs. I didn't necessarily believe in one God, and I didn't necessarily believe in the Bible and the church being the only place that I could actually speak to, if you like, some form of ordained being. Now, I'm probably mixing my language all over the place like that because I'll be honest, I'm not necessarily a Christian expert. But what I will say is that from very early on, I didn't feel fulfillment in living a Christian life, shall we say. Although instead of actually completely saying, I don't want to do that, what I did was I basically opened myself up to the possibility of other things. From a spiritual perspective, I favored actually more paganism and more pagan beliefs. One of the things that I really value is the natural world and the earth that we live upon. Why do I describe it like that? Well, because factually it's true. We're all on the planet and we all can't deny that the planet has many living sentient beings, not just humans and animals, but the grass, the plants, the sun, and also that we have a natural cycle of our life as we go through different seasons. So for me, actually coordinating some practices and beliefs around those actually seemed very authentic to me. Another thing that's cropped up in the last couple of years that I wasn't really looking for, but actually I found that has actually helped me is looking at my personal identity. So what I mean by that, I mean my values and my beliefs. Sometimes I actually realized that some of the values that were quite core for me were actually influenced by somebody who didn't necessarily have my best interests at heart. Needless to say, I've been having some therapy and some counseling on these sorts of things, but actually it's been quite eye-opening to know that even when I'm in my 40s, there are still things that I can actually go back and reflect on. One of the things that I've really looked at since I've been looking at this journey of self-discovery and self-identity for myself has actually been around my pronouns. Not just pronouns, but necessarily, but actually what identity I have as an individual. Now, remember a little bit earlier on, literally a couple of minutes ago, I said that I didn't necessarily like wearing dresses. Well, it goes a little bit deeper than that. Basically, what it means is that when I think of myself, I'm very accepting and I'm grateful for this, that I'm accepting of the fact that I was born female. I also consider myself to be female. I accept all my wobbly bits as I describe it to people. And I don't have dysphoria. And I know some people do. So I'm grateful for that. But what I also realized was that this container of being female seemed to be a box that I was actually not fitting completely in. It was almost like it was a circular hole and I was a square peg. It felt like I often wanted to be more, than just pure female. So when I started extra counseling, when I started extra areas of that, one of the things I did was I talked about what it meant to be more non-binary. That's when I actually realized that whilst I was fully accepting of the fact that I was female, I also actually was quite happy to accept the fact that I was also a little bit non-binary. I don't necessarily mean that I want to become a man. What it means is that I just felt like that the non-binary box, if you like, could actually stand next to the female box. And my identity was actually straddling over both of them. It's a bit of a crude description, I guess, but it's the one that makes the most sense in my head. As such, it's only actually been a few months ago since I actually decided to change my pronouns from, rather than just being she, her, I actually am now more comfortable in describing myself as a she, they. Pronouns for me was actually more important than I thought they would be. Why is that? I'm probably still trying to figure that out. The problem, or the main issue, is that once I realized that it was something that was bothering me, I was curious and I wanted to actually explore it more. And I guess that's the essence that I'm looking for with people. I'm hoping that this podcast will actually help people to open their own eyes about their situations and just be willing to be a little bit more curious about themselves and what they want to achieve, not necessarily what society says that they should achieve. One of the other things that I actually spoke about in previous years was actually my identity as a person. When I was younger, I mentioned that I had some chronic conditions. One of my first chronic conditions was endometriosis, which, for those who don't know, it can affect your fertility. As a teenager and starting to suffer at symptoms like that, it was actually really quite concerning for me that I may have to make a decision about whether I wanted children or not. And actually, I was told that pretty much I needed to do it sooner rather than later. Now, you heard that right. When I was diagnosed at 21, I was actually told by a consultant that the best thing I could do was have a child. Not only would that mean that I had a child sooner rather than later, but it was always also seen an acceptable way to treat the condition. I look back on it now and I actually smile and smirk about it. But at the time, I was quite distressed. One of the things I also said was that it came with a hell of a side effect, that treatment. And what would I do about the actual human being I had that I'd birthed? I didn't take that route. Instead, what I did was I did some research. I met with others in the community that suffered. And what I did was I really, really tried to make sure that no matter what I was doing, I was making the long-term decisions that I felt was right for me. Unfortunately, what that meant was a number of pills, a number of medications, and lots of other things on top of it. So one of the things that I talked about at that time was the fact that I didn't really want to spend a lot of my life worrying about whether I would have children or not. And what that turned into later on in life was the fact that I wasn't really that worried about having children at all. Now, maybe that could be a little bit about because of what I've seen as a person or my experience of children. I'm an only child, so my upbringing was quite lonely. But I really didn't want to be responsible for anybody else. The things that I'm telling you right now are experiences that make me me. Whilst I have actually spent a lot of my life in pain or uncertainty, I wouldn't actually give much of it up for anything because it's actually molded me into the person I am today. The person that I'm self-aware of what's going on, that I'm in tune, or that I try to be in tune at least with my body and my feelings. And the fact that I actually want to try and help others. I think one of the things I'm most passionate about is actually making sure that people know that they're not alone and that their feelings are valid and that they can actually have support. I think, in essence, if you look at the two of self-discovery and self-identity, you'll find that the self-discovery is the act of traveling down the road or helping to shape that road. And the self-identity is the vehicle that travels. Both have the ability to shape one another, but ultimately, those two tools are the things that you can use to start to focus on who you are and, more importantly, who you might want to be in future. Some people don't get a choice about exploring their identity. They understand or they acknowledge that they're suffering and that they actually feel that their identity is not where they want to be. So they have to look at change. I do feel for those people who feel they have no choice but to change. But there are plenty of other people out there as well who actually probably do secretly want to change, but are scared. Because let's face it, as human beings, we're not actually very good at change at all. If anything, we actually don't like change. Despite what we say, we like our routines and we like knowing that we know what to expect, whereas change brings uncertainty. This is one of the reasons why I want to brand myself as a life transitions and identity coach. Not necessarily because I think that life transitions is easier to define, but more about the fact that it's the journey of change. Change has a lot of different phrases and it can be very uncomfortable, particularly if you're alone or you're not sure whether you're actually being influenced by the right people, the right situations, and the right environment. I really actually wanted to talk a lot about those sorts of areas of identity. And one of the reasons why I created this podcast was over the next few weeks, I'm going to be diving into some of those different aspects of a human's identity. I'm also going to be inviting some various guest speakers to talk to me about areas that they're passionate about and how they can support. One of the reasons why I like doing that is because I do like to actually showcase and hear other people's stories and tales of what's made them them. Now, I don't want to give everything away, so I'm not necessarily going to talk about each of the aspects of the human identity, not in any great detail. But what I can say is that each of the episodes are going to be focused on an aspect of each of those identities, some of which are actually going to be more in depth than others. Some we're probably just going to scratch the surface. And because it's my own podcast, what I'm going to do is I'm going to probably look at throwing some bonus pieces in there as well, just purely on some topics that I'm passionate about. So look out for those as well. The main thing about this podcast is that I'm going to try and set up a consistency of doing an episode a week, making it available at the same time every week, so that hopefully you can get into your own routine about listening along. Now, it's not going to be realistic for me to release an episode a week forever. So I'm probably going to limit it down to a series, which is this being series 1, and then actually try and end it by the end of the year, because who doesn't want time off at Christmas? And then what I'll look at doing, probably depending on the popularity of this podcast, is to actually look at a series 2 next year. That doesn't mean you're going to have to wait a whole year like Bridgerton. If I do a series 2, I'll probably release it in the first half of next year. Can you believe that this is actually the first time that I've actually done a podcast? And I'm actually really enjoying the experience of planning it. Obviously, I don't necessarily have the high-tech information and the high-tech that other people have. So there's probably going to be a few of my friends who are going to say, I can't believe you're recording this on a normal headset through your computer. But here you go. Here I am. If I do actually find that I get the podcast bug, then I may well actually invest in, more high-tech stuff. But for now, this is where it is. Each episode is probably going to be somewhere between 45 and 50 minutes. And the reason why I say that is probably going to end up cutting this one short because it's just me talking to myself. But when I actually find that I'm talking to other people, I do get a little bit carried away. I'm also going to say that I'm not actually a good person at being patient at editing and sound levels. So I'll do what I can. but there's no guarantee. This is what I would call a raw and real set of conversations and talks. So if I say or are for too many times, then I apologize, but I'm actually not going to edit them out. I'm not perfect, and I'm not going to pretend to be anything like that. So yeah, that's me. And I'm really glad that I took the time to actually talk a little bit about self-discovery and self-identity. And I'm more than happy to talk to anybody else who's really curious about it and how it can take you to the next step. Obviously, this has just been a little bit of an insight, and I may well return to these particular two elements again, but I just wanted it to be a quick summary so that you could hopefully have it in your mind as we go through the other elements of the podcast. If you've managed to carry on listening this far and you've actually found my voice not too annoying, I just want to say thanks for joining me today. If the episode has actually sparked something in you, I really do want you to tell me about it. You can connect with me via various social platforms, and I'm going to put the details of me as well as my guests in the episode description so that you can find. And with that, I will actually take a drink and log off for now. But I look forward to talking to you again as and when it happens. I probably will look to alternate between talking myself and also having a guest speaker on because, I like to shake things up a little bit. So until next time, until we can talk again, stay grounded, stay curious, and keep living authentically. Thanks, and bye for now.